Courtney Fingar, editor of FDI Magazine, reporting in from the IMF World Bank annual meetings in Washington, D.C. We've just had a quite interesting chat with the finance minister of Chile, in which he discussed the country's economy and also South America's FDI position. Here are the highlights.
Maybe some of you know, a couple of weeks ago we came to New York and we issued a bond, a dual bond, like we did last year. And we raised $1 billion in dollars and $350 million in pesos. The $1 billion in dollars was at 335, which is the lowest rate in our history. And as far as I know, and it was confirmed by people in Wall Street, it was the lowest rate of any Latin American issuer in history. So we were happy with the terms, and probably it will try to go today or this week. After what we did, it would have been very difficult, and most likely in the peso tranche, because the peso is more complicated with the volatility of exchange rates these days. So we don't know what's exactly going to happen in the world economy. We have our own view, but we are having a contingency plan to do what is necessary if things get worse. Like insurance policy, a contingency plan is something that we wouldn't like to use, but if necessary we will use. And I think that one thing that differentiates the Chilean economy is that we have room of maneuver, both in fiscal and monetary policy. We have a level of government debt to GDP is 9%. That's the gross debt. Net debt is minus 7.5% of GDP. We have more assets than public assets than liabilities. So we are net creditors to the rest of the world. And if we would go to markets, it's because, first of all, we committed to come back, and we did, and because it was a good opportunity to get funding in a complicated international situation where liquidity will be at a premium if things get worse. So it's part of our contingency plan, and also to provide a benchmark for companies. We will have a fiscal surplus this year. The economy will grow around 6.5%. And of course, there will be a deceleration next year. How far the deceleration will go, we don't know. But it depends on how the world economy reacts. And I think it's time. We emerging markets are part of the solution right now, mainly Latin America and Asia, but other emerging markets as well. And the problem now lies in the developed world, and it's the responsibility of governments, particularly in Europe, but also in the US, to act, and to act decisively. It is not time for half measures.
I want to ask about foreign direct investment. It's the subject of our magazine. According to our data, South America is one of the few regions in the world that showed growth in inbound FDI throughout the recession. What is the basis for this?
Well, I think that the basis is that you have a region with lots of opportunities, a region that is growing well. Some of this FDI is not directed to the local economies. It's directed to the world economy, and some of it goes to natural resources. But in the case of Chile, we have very strong projects in mining, but there are projects throughout the different economic sectors, but most prominently in mining and energy. Those are the highest, sectors with the highest potential for FDI in our country. And I think that, FDI will have probably a longer-term view than just the short-term capital, so that we expect the strength of FDI based on the structure, the health and the structure of the economy. If you have an economy that is well managed, that has, the rules of the game are clear, and then you have the competitive natural resources and other sectors of the economy. By the way, Chile becoming a regional financial center. I announced something that you probably don't know, but this week, actually, we're submitting to Congress a bill in which we are changing the tax treatment. We're proposing this to Congress, has to be approved, has to go through the legislative process. But we are changing for funds that are managed in Chile, but whose assets are mainly out of the country. More than 80% of the assets out of the country, you have no capital gains tax for those kind of funds. And then that's something that we're submitting. And then you have if the fund is invested locally, then there's a 10% tax. And also we are proposing to eliminate the value-added tax for foreigners that get their their management, their money management in our country. So you have when the participant is a foreigner, you got the administrator of the fund will charge a fee. That fee is subject to value-added tax for locals and foreigners. Right now, we are submitting legislation so that foreigners would be exempt because that would be the export of the service. You know, it's the same thing then with exports, you know, but we're assimilating this export of services. So that's another thing that we're working on in terms of our capital markets.
Because your fiscal position is really enviable. Are there applicable lessons, or do you think you're just kind of lucky in a way from your commodity situation?
No, because we could have spent. Many countries have the windfall and they spend it. And the lesson of this is institutions, is the fact that we have a structural rule in that we spend according to structural income. I was just making this point at a panel, you know, at 3:30 p.m. The point is that, let me make a contrast. If you have a balanced budget rule, I don't like balanced budget rules because it's pro-cyclical fiscal policy. To run a balanced budget means that when you get more, you can spend more, but that's not the way it should be. It should be the other way around. In that when you have a windfall, you save for a rainy day. And for that reason, the state of the art on this is structural balance. So you according to your structural income. How do we do it? We get long-term, each country is different, long-term copper prices. And with long-term copper prices, you know, and trend growth or potential growth. Those are the two things. So we don't look at the current expansion or current growth or at the current copper price. So when people say, oh, what are you going to do? Copper prices have declined. I have my structural parameters, so I'm going to spend according to them. And if things get very bad, I may run a deficit. You know, we may run a deficit. And if things are very good, well, we'll run a surplus. And in this way, we go with our path to reduce the structural deficit, which is what we're committed.